My name is Average Joe, and I'm a proud geek with expertise in movies, superheroes, and animation.
My name is Beef Pork Ribs. I'm a fine repository of esoteric knowledge, which I suppose most people would qualify as geeky. Though I dabble in many fandoms, my main areas of expertise are anime, movies, and Belgian comics, with a strong recent insurgency of D&D.
Our mission is to bring nerd and geek culture to the masses
by sticking it all under the microscope.
Welcome to the Bat Jar Podcast. Hello there, and welcome to the Bat Jar Podcast, where we put nerd and geek culture under the microscope.
I was going to do a thing where I was just going to yell, ah! But then I realized I probably shouldn't do that given that we have many guests without a forewarning, so I'm going to, ah! Yep, that's my contribution to the episode today.
I hope that's the only time that happens today. It's ironic, actually, Beef Pork Ribs, because even though we're talking about a movie where someone is left home alone, we are indeed joined by a variety of guests today. So we are indeed not alone at all, and it is atypical, but that's okay. It just means it's a special episode. And, you know, part of the Christmas episode feel is having special guests that you don't see very often. Like I watched the one of the Christmas episodes of Girl Meets World last week, and it involved like 4 different cast members from the original Boy Meets World coming in for the holidays, and it was neat. And anyway, back with us today for the first time in a little bit, we have Ben the Movie Buff.
Hey, how are ya? It's been a while. I wish I could have been on the Nightmare Before Christmas episode last week, but the stars did not align. What they did for Home Alone, so I am super excited to talk about this Christmas classic with you guys. And I was thinking of doing the same kind of noise, but I guess I'll just do it quietly so it doesn't sound so bad. And I'll do the, I don't know if you heard that, but that was me putting my hands against my cheek, just like Macaulay Culkin does in the movie.
And somebody who is returning to the show, who has not been here really since the start of the pandemic, is Minty Python.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for having me back, Average Joseph and Beef Pork Ribs. I always love coming on, and I can't wait to savage this movie.
You keep saying my name wrong. I'm not Average Joseph. I'm an Average Joe.
Okay, you'll have to forgive me, Average Joe.
It's
Potato.
It's the Christmas season, right? Like, I think you can find it in your heart somewhere to forgive me.
Okay, maybe by the time we're done this, I will. But tell everyone who's listening right now, what kind of nerdy or geeky things have you been up to since you were last on the show?
Okay, so I'm always, I say this every time I come on, I like to read books. So at the beginning of the pandemic, I decided I wanted to start reading more, just increasing the volume of books I'm going through. So I recently purchased a Kobo e-reader, which is one of my top purchases of 2020. And yeah, I've been reading a lot of books. I think that the number one book I enjoyed since the pandemic was a novel called A Gentleman in Moscow. I'd highly recommend to anyone. So that's kind of the geeky, nerdy stuff I've been up to, I guess. I don't know if you consider reading books but that's the closest I get. So,
Beeper, what do you think?
Specifically about the Kobo?
No, like is I think reading books is nerdy.
Oh, buying technology in order to read book I've always found to be kind of the epitome of what nerdy is, but I think so. I think it's enough. But I think there's this kind of weird ambiguity where a lot of people would agree, but then some people would say, because they're purists, would say, but it depends what books you read. I don't think that I don't agree with that, but I think like a lot more people would think that reading things like, sci-fi or fantasy makes you a nerd, whereas just reading doesn't necessarily. But then I'd argue that any reading in large quantity kind of goes into the nerdy thing. Like my sister used to read the encyclopedia. That's definitely nerdy, but it's not things that are traditionally considered nerdy.
All right, I think I'm just going to log that one away for a future podcast episode. Look what you're doing, Minty Python. You're already getting off track.
My pleasure. Much more of that to come.
And with us today for the first time, we have a new guest. Her name is Mrs. McCallister.
Hello. Thanks for having me here. I don't It's my first time to really do podcasting stuff, so I'm kind of just nervous here. But thanks for having me, Average Joe and Beef Pork Ribs.
Now tell us, Mrs. McCallister, what kind of nerd or geek are you?
I would want to say I'm kind of a wannabe geek. I'm someone. Speaking of books, I'm someone that joins reading clubs, but never shows up because I actually never picked up the book to read. But I like the thought of it. Same with I don't know, just kind of things about pop culture, whatever. Like I like doing these things, but I never want to do the work. So how about a lazy one?
I would say you're becoming a real Christmas geek because like the way you decorate. I mean, I see you on Instagram, the way you decorate your home and the traditions you have with your family. Like you seem to really like Christmas.
Yes, but I also don't. I don't want my house to look like Christmas puked all over it. Like I want to. I don't know. Like would I count as a Christmas geek if I wanted to have a classy Christmas?
I think that the Christmas geekdom is more about the amount of energy and knowledge that you pour into it. Also, I have a recommendation for a quick way into geekdom if you want to remain slightly lazy. Wikipedia pages.
That is fair, but I think you know what? I'll stick to BuzzFeed articles that give me kind of random headlines.
Only if you stay away
Uh,
from anime. BuzzFeed is notoriously terrible at anime.
Okay, good to know. I know nothing about anime, but that's good to know.
so, Mrs. McAllister, what kind of nerd or geek would you like to be?
I want to be a nerd or geek that kills it in Jeopardy. That's all. Like I just want to win money if I ever join a trivia show.
Yeah, that's pretty. That I think you're the first person to ever have a very specifically tangible like thing to grow in. Most people are like, oh, I'd like to say I know more about this or that, but that's something very specific. So, in terms of an actual goal, that could actually happen one day. So, based on your name you've chosen for yourself, I presume that you're a fan of Home Alone.
I am, yeah, big huge fan. I wouldn't ever claim to be a fan of Home Alone 3 and up, and I don't think anyone should be, but definitely Home Alone's 1 and 2.
Oh, that's a good as transition as any. So, yes, Mrs. McCallister, Minty Python, Ben the Movie Buff. We are not home alone today in the podcast because you're with us. And we are indeed talking about Home Alone, the 1990 Christmas film that is it's a natural point for us to be talking about this movie because it is indeed getting closer and closer to Christmas. And this is a movie we've discussed a handful of times on the podcast before. Minty Python, I recall an episode you and I did a few years ago talking about Christmas franchises. And at that point, you had not yet seen any of the Home Alone movies.
Yeah, that's correct. And only as of yesterday have I seen the first Home Alone.
So that pretty much addresses his secret origin segment for this topic, only having seen the movie yesterday for the first time. How about everybody else? Would you say is there anyone who has also discovered the movie recently, or is it something we all grew up with?
Can I ask a question? Minty Python, did you not grow up with a TV? Because it's on repeat.
Yeah, we didn't grow up with cable. We had like a VHS machine or VCR, whatever those things were called. I can't even remember. But we didn't have satellite. Was satellite a thing? We didn't have cable. So no, yeah, I guess I kind of did grow up without a TV.
For me, I don't remember the first time I watched Home Alone, but I was definitely pretty young. I, of course, remember the last 30 to 35 minutes the most. I think it's kind of like the most famous part that everyone kind of looks forward to, even though the whole movie is good. But I do remember pretty much year after year, I would tune in and watch highlights of the movie. And then as I got older, I finally sat down and watched the whole thing from start to finish. And yeah, I've it's been in my life as far back as I can remember, to be honest.
I didn't grow up without a TV, although I did grow up not watching TV on weekdays, and that sometimes was included in the holidays. But I grew up French, which means there's a number of movies that everybody's seen that sometimes I'm like, oh yeah, I've seen that, but I've no idea if it was the same experience as you. And Home Alone was one of those. I had seen it when I was a kid at school. I think mostly. My family was never a big Christmas movie family or a very big Christmas family, to be honest. Like we would put up decorations on December 20th because it was my sister's birthday, and take them down on January 4th, which was my birthday. So like it wasn't that big of a season per se, and uh, anyways, the emphasis was always more on midnight mass and réveillon because we're French Canadian and other things. But so I was aware of Home Alone. I think I watched it for the first time in English, start to finish, somewhere in high school. Um, Partially because one of my close friends from high school does have a tendency to call people filthy animals as a tribute to that movie. I think Average Joe knows who I'm talking about, can attest that he does indeed still do that in his 29th year of life, which is great. And I think, yeah, I really enjoyed it. However, if we're going with my secret origin story with the movie, I think it goes back a little bit further back, because growing up, a lot of people said that I look like Macaulay Culkin. Or like I would get, oh, you look like the Home Alone kid, constantly when I was a kid, and um, because I watched the movie in French when I didn't actually know who that was until around the time I was in high school.
I have like the DVD collection of the Home Alones, and in French the title's like "Maman, je veux." Basically, it's like "Mom, I missed the plane." Like a total. I mean, I guess that the spirit of the title is still there, but totally
That
different.
happens all the time for French movies. They just like give longer titles, and it's just like you didn't need it to be that long, or things that are like, I can't remember what it is, but Jingle All the Way has a similar title. I think Jingle All the Way is in French is named after the toy that Arnold Schwarzenegger is looking for, as opposed to,
Probamando.
yeah. So, but it's like l'aventure pour la poupée. I can't remember exactly, but it's like, yeah, it's super long and it talks about the doll, but it has nothing to do with the original title.
I would say that it was one of my first movies I saw in theater. I think I was living in a country in Asia at that time, and um, I remember seeing two movies in theater when I was a little kid, and it was first one being Home Alone, second one being Lion King, and that's all I can remember. So, yeah,
Was it an Asian dub of the film, or was it in English?
nah, it's in English.
Fair enough. I don't think I wasn't alive when the film came out, so I definitely didn't see it in theaters. And I kind of like Ben the movie buff. I don't really remember a time when it wasn't always on TV. I do remember whenever I would watch it on a YTV that they would always censor the one line where his older brother Buzz uh, makes a reference to his ass. And for whatever reason, YTV felt the need to overdub the line with butt. And it's just hilarious because even as a kid, I could tell, wait a minute, his mouth movements are not matching the words he is using.
That's hilarious. Just speaking of censorship of the show, I think they censor different parts now, especially Home Alone 2. They actually, like, on if it's playing on, I don't know, CBC or something, they play the political game and censor Donald Trump scenes. I don't know if you guys
But
noticed that, but they never play Donald Trump scenes anymore.
it's true. Yeah, he has a quick cameo in Home Alone too, because the fictional Plaza Hotel is the actual Trump hotel, and yeah, they censored his cameo out. But I also like Home Alone always was a thing. Always watched it on TV, and I have a fun memory from a few years ago. Minty Python, you and I were working together, and I was playing like some Christmas dubstep music in our office. And at one point in this track, they insert the filthy animal line from Home Alone, and we both started laughing. I was laughing because I knew it was a Home Alone reference, but you were laughing for a different reason.
Yeah, that holds a special place in my heart as a funny moment we've shared together. Absolutely, it struck me as hilarious because I had no idea what it was referring to, um, and yet in my mind, it was just an absurd Christmas dubstep playlist. When you say that in itself, it's kind of amusing, and then yeah, when you throw in "Merry Christmas, you filthy animals," that's even funnier. So I actually, when I heard that, I don't think in the original they don't say "Merry Christmas, you filthy animals." They just say "You filthy animal," right? Am I correct?
Yes, that's right.
Yeah, but it was nice because I finally was brought into what that was referring to, and I suppose that actual line is somewhere in one of the sequels.
All right, so there we go. That's been our secret origin segment. We're all ready. We all know what level of exposure we've had to this franchise. Now, I see in our notes here, someone has written that Home Alone is the best Christmas movie and arguably one of the best movies of all time. I do not make that claim, nor am I responsible for that dialogue. So please, whoever wrote that, speak now.
Yeah, that was totally me. But I don't think this is subjective. Like I think it is objectively one of the best Christmas movies of all time. Like it actually holds a Guinness World Record and it held it for 25 years, meaning that it was at one point the highest grossing film and earned a Guinness World Record. So having the Guinness World Record, I feel like, could objectively call it one of the best movies of all time.
Sounds
Minty
like
Python.
blasphemy.
I just watched a
Blasphemy.
Christmas movie the other day that is already better, but it's only been out for what, a year now about. So
It,
I don't know. Klaus
it,
was a
it
great movie, but we're not here to talk about great Christmas movies. We're here to talk about Home Alone.
We're here to talk about bad Christmas movies, in particular, Home Alone.
Well, I mean, the quality of them, like, we can get into that for sure. Regardless of how you might feel about Home Alone, Mrs. McCallister is right. It was a huge financial success when it came out. It was the number one movie at the box office for 3 months in a row, like 12 weeks nonstop. It was the number one movie. It came out mid-November and it was number one until mid-February. And there's very few films that have come out in the history of ever that can attest to that. And Ben, the movie buff, like you are the movie buff. It's literally in your name. So can you comment on the significance of being number one for that long?
Yeah, absolutely. I would say, um, now, Box Office Mojo, of course, changed its design last year, so it's a bit harder to navigate. But there was a time where you could go onto Box Office Mojo and you could check out every single weekend in a given year to see what movie was number one. So, for example, last year, Avengers Endgame was number one for, I think, something like 4 to 5 weeks. But then after that, another summer blockbuster came around and dethroned Avengers Endgame and was the number one opening movie of that weekend. But yeah, there are a handful of movies. I think like E.T. being one of them, Titanic being another, that have held the number one spot in the box office for like longer than 6 or 7 weeks, and that is really impressive. For the reason being that back in normal times, pre-COVID, every weekend you have at least a couple new movies coming out. So you'd think that normally, even a successful movie. Can only be number one for so long until eventually something dethrones it and is just slightly more popular than that movie that's been number one. So yes, for a movie to be number one like more than 6 or 7 weeks, like for the length that Home Alone did it and some other movies that I mentioned earlier, is really impressive because there's so much to choose from. But a movie like Home Alone, I guess, basically says that it is so good and people want more, that they are willing to go back and see Home Alone a second or third time, that the word of mouth is still spreading and more people want to see this movie, that it takes over a lot of the other new releases. So they stay, even like a really impressive release after Home Alone would be at number two if Home Alone is still strong enough to hold it off. Yeah, there's all sorts of competition. So for a movie to be number one longer than a month, longer than 4 or 5 weeks, is still a very impressive feat because it does not happen that often.
Like Minty Python, take this into consideration. By the end of its run in theaters, Home Alone was like at that time in 1991, I guess, was the third highest grossing film of all time behind Star Wars and E.T. How do you respond to that?
My response is simple. No, if I'm being honest, I enjoyed the movie, and I can understand why it's a tradition for many people. But I am shocked that it performs so well. My response to that is those are the facts. I can't argue with it. So quite clearly it was a popular movie, and it still is. Uh, I understand why people like it, um, but I'm not sure why I understand its degree of popularity is that high. If that makes sense.
We also need to not fall into the pitfall of associating popularity and direct box office success to quality. And also, like obviously I did not do enough research into this, but it's one of those things that's like when you see some of the movies that won the Oscar, you're like, okay, what were they up against that year? And you're like, oh yeah, there were no good movie that year, so it makes sense that this movie wins. So I don't know what other movies were out that holiday season or around that time that year, but it could also, like, a lot of these movies, like, yes, I'm not saying Home Alone was just lucky, like, yes, holding the top of the box office for that amount of time is impressive, but at the same time it does also depend what it was up against. And I think that if you put it up against certain other Christmas movies, then I think the it's objectively the best starts to lose a lot of its shine.
Now, it's interesting to like again go back and like think about that time period because back then it was really movie stars that sold movies. So you went and saw a movie with Arnold Schwarzenegger or Sylvester Stallone in it because they were a big star. And so when Home Alone was pitched as like this movie starring a little kid, and that they were most likely going to choose like a child actor to play the part, it really did not seem like a good idea. So the original movie studio that had financed the film, Warner Brothers, was only willing to pay a certain amount of money to make the film. And once they actually started like building sets and doing all this stuff, they realized the budget was they were promised they were given a $10 million budget, and the budget they ended up working with after doing all the work, I guess, was like closer to 15 million. And Warner Brothers basically said they won't do the movie for more than 13 and a half. And believe it or not, I guess Warner Brothers was really pinching their pennies because they decided to not go ahead with the movie. So there was like a few days where Home Alone might have never happened. But as it turns out, the producer of the movie was talking to people at Fox at the same time and kind of floated the idea, said, hey, like our movie might get canned at this one studio. Would you guys be willing to pick it up? And they were like, yeah, that sounds like a great idea. Legally speaking, you're not supposed to like share your movie ideas with other studios while it's being produced. There's like some jargon that I don't understand that basically makes that illegitimate. But you know what? Because someone broke the rules, we now have Home Alone. Because indeed, Fox saw the opportunity that Warner Brothers did not, picked up the film, and now we have Home Alone. Does it surprise any of you that Warner Brothers was not willing to pay the extra money to make this film?
Not even remotely. Child actors are notoriously dangerous investment, and like I put it in the chat that they did have Joe Pesci, but like they had Joe Pesci playing a very weird role at that point in his career. Like he was like that wasn't something you'd expect him to be in, and a lot of it just seemed really like it's a strange movie, and the idea behind it was kind of strange. Like I don't like obviously you can always blame studio executives for not taking risks, but at the same time it's there is a certain level that you can understand. Now that being said, once it was kind of in production, ditching it, that's an interesting thing to try to look at and try to justify, but not necessarily surprised they had a lack of faith in it.
The thing we need to keep in mind here is that there have been many famous films, many very well made films that we know of that like people have seen and have really resonated with. That when studio executives are looking at these scripts and trying to figure out what which ones to actually put all their money into, we got to remember that a script is just a script, and as important as scripts are, they aren't the final movie. So I bet you anything that Warner Bros. Looking at this script, maybe didn't see how cute and incredible Macaulay Culkin was going to be. I guess they didn't see like the potential for all the comedy and how much of a feel good Christmas movie it was. So I think it just goes to show that there are all sorts of great movies that have scripts where people look at them and I guess they can't see the potential and I guess they say like, oh, we can't put too much money into this because we don't think we're going to make our money back or we don't think it's going to be a box office smash. So I think that's the kind of important thing to remember is that we can talk about Home Alone and be like, man, I can't believe how they didn't see that. But clearly, lots of studio executives read all sorts of scripts and possibly pass up on some good ones where they just don't see the potential or they don't see themselves making the money back. So you never know what's going to be popular and what isn't because Hollywood's always changing.
I was just going to echo what Ben the movie buff said. Hindsight is 2020. This kind of thing probably happens all the time in the movie industry, and you just don't hear about it because the movies never came to be.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. And just to kind of circle back about child actors being difficult, I think it has been pretty well known that Columbus did learn how difficult it was after the filming of, I think, the first Home Alone. Macaulay's parents actually had a huge legal fight over Macaulay's fortune during the filming of Home Alone. And so Columbus and Macaulay, and anyways, it just was a big mess. And he learned that the whole family had to be involved. So child actors in general is a big investment. You're involving not just the actor, but the whole family itself.
Mrs. McCallister brings up the director of this movie, Chris Columbus, who is not the founder, or not the founder. He's not the founder of America. He's claimed as the discoverer of America. This is just a movie director named Chris Columbus. He has quite a reputation for working well with children, and as I've heard actors talk about the experience working with him, they say like, oh, like he treated us like actors, not like kids, because he went from doing Adventures in Babysitting, was like his first movie he ever directed, and then he did Home Alone, then he did Mrs. Doubtfire, and he went on to direct the first two Harry Potter movies. So he clearly like knows how to work well with child actors. Before we go any farther, Beeffork Ribs, give us the Blu-ray case description of the film.
Terrible feeling.
So which house you want to hit first, huh?
About what?
That we didn't do something.
Crowbars up.
Now you feel that way because we left in such a hurry.
Do we set the timers on the lights?
Mm-hmm.
Did you lock up?
Yeah,
Did you close the garage?
that's it. I forgot to close the garage, that's it.
No, that's not it.
What else can we be forgetting?
Kevin!
Home Alone.
This is my house. I have to defend it. Yes!
Starring Macaulay Culkin.
Up here, you morons! Come and get me!
A Christmas holiday. A terrible mother. A child left behind. Two criminals. And tons of booby traps. I think I like the style I went for there. I think we can keep it at that. It leaves it mysterious without giving too much away. And I think the title, Home Alone, kind of speaks for himself. Kid is home alone. Burglars try to burgle the house. He makes booby traps. They run away.
So yeah, full spoilers, guys. This movie is now 30 years old. So if you haven't seen it, we're just going to go straight into it here. The first thing I want to kind of raise is the Batjar podcast has a very kind of strict philosophy when it comes to Christmas movies. And I say that the podcast has this philosophy, but it's really my philosophy that I keep shoving onto everyone who's part of these conversations. So in the podcast's theory, there are three kinds of Christmas movies. A-types, which are movies where the entire plot is focused around Christmas or a Christmas-themed character. A B-type is a Christmas film wherein the plot doesn't necessarily entirely revolve around Christmas, but it sort of comes into the plot at some point. These ones are kind of the hardest to like gauge as if it's an A or a B. And then C-types are very simple. They're films that are set during Christmas that really have nothing to do with Christmas, where Christmas is mostly just the background scenery. So a movie like Gremlins or Die Hard or Lethal Weapon all qualify as C-type Christmas films. And so the real question is, with Home Alone, is it an A-type or a B-type?
Can I play the devil's advocate here and say it's a C-type?
I agree. I was just about to
because
say that.
Look, this movie could have happened during any major holiday or even just during the summer holidays. Like it could have, like I understand that the themes that they try to hit are Christmassy and feel good family things because it's around Christmas, but there is no necessity for Christmas in the plot.
Well, I mean, I think I kind of see it as a B type because like the climax is on Christmas Eve and they do, like, you're right, like they could be going away for summer vacation, but they try and work it into the plot to say like, oh, because it's Christmas time and people are going away, that's when the burglars are going to happen. So it, in my mind, it's a B type because Christmas becomes important towards the end of the movie, especially like the whole theme of like family reunification that kind of comes in at the very end there.
I would agree with that. And just to add on, like so much of the plot does revolve around going to the church, which like for a lot of people is around Christmas time, or um yeah, going to the toy store, which is particularly busy during Christmas time. So I would say that like a lot of things wouldn't make sense outside of Christmas time.
Yeah, so I would also argue that it's a B type Christmas movie for the reason that it seems to me a pretty common theme in a lot of Christmas movies, besides, it being about Christmas and specific Christmassy things like getting a tree or wrapping presents or all that sort of thing. Is really family and friends coming together. There's something that kind of has you apart, and you're coming together to be social with other people during the holidays. And the nice thing is that even though Kevin's family seems to not really be a huge fan of him at the beginning of the movie, and he also doesn't like them very much, hence why he wishes that they would disappear, is that his immediate family works very hard to get back home to Kevin to be with him on Christmas. And I guess most importantly, because like they're scared that like, oh, what's going to happen to him? Is he going to burn the house down like his brother Buzz thinks he will? Is he going to go missing or whatever? So I would say B type because I think there's enough Christmassy stuff. And average Joseph makes a very good point that towards the end, Christmas is more important. But yes, I would also, on the other side, say that like the family disappearing, yeah, could have been on another holiday, and Kevin could have been, yeah, like by himself, and yeah, there could have been like wet bandits or other sort of criminals that were robbing people's homes during another time of year.
Although that does beg the question, like, would Home Alone be as successful a film if it was, like, say, set during the summer? Like, let's imagine it's the same plot, the exact same plot. They're going to France. They forget him. They fly to France without him. There's burglars trying to break in the house. If this was like set during the summer and it was like a summer vacation kind of movie, do you guys think it would still like have the popularity it has today?
I think
I don't think so. I don't think so. I think it has to be attached to a tradition of watching it at Christmas. That's just my initial impression from seeing it for the first time yesterday. That's my initial thought. And also, I'll concede the point. I think it is a B type movie.
I think it depends on. So I don't know if I'm imagining thing, but I am pretty sure there is a French movie with a very similar plot, and I think it doesn't work as well in North America, which means it wouldn't have done as well, obviously, if it wasn't around Christmas. And like, I'm not crazy. I do realize that Christmas is a big thing, but there are a number of countries in which like leaving for the summer holidays is a lot more common. Whereas here, leaving for the winter holidays is a lot more common in North America, especially like in Canada. We have this idea that so many people go south during the holidays, but like if the film was like in France or in Sweden, where it's like literally towns seem to be deserted during the summer holidays because they're all flocking to other places, I think it might have a similar impact, and it could be something that's y- you could still turn it into a fun summer comedy, which I think would still work. And there's a large amount of booby traps that could still work within uh, the idea of an empty summer instead of winter, but also like the idea that things are almost empty instead of super busy also like could be a good a comedic element to it, as opposed to people assuming that his parents are somewhere in the mall but not with him directly, just assuming that he went alone during the summer because it's too warm.
I'd say part of the draw of Home Alone is the Christmas magic to it. There's themes of forgiveness and, like Average Joe has mentioned, like just the family aspects, which are all very Christmassy themes. Like when the neighbor reunites with his daughter, was it? But anyways, there's just the Christmas magic where you don't necessarily get those themes of forgiveness and family necessarily in summer style movies.
Well, you got to reconcile with your brother's uncle that you took the sunscreen from. um, yeah, okay. So I think that settles that. We'll stamp it. Say Home Alone's a B type film. But to me, it's also the kind of movie that really you couldn't make now, because it's a product of its time, in that with the technology we have today, like, this kind of thing wouldn't happen.
Okay, but this kind of thing wouldn't happen if you were a reasonable parent. Doing a head count is really not that complicated.
The movie, I think, does a good enough job explaining under this, like, they write the movie, and I say they, I'm meaning John Hughes, the man who wrote the movie. He wrote the script in a way that, like, there's an answer to everything. Like, that annoying neighbor kid was part of the head count, and everyone's in a super big rush. Like, they rationalize it. But if people had, like, cell phones or iPads or Wi-Fi, they would have been able to connect with Kevin a lot easier if they had left him behind. Uh, the so much of the conflict that is created in this script would not exist with modern technology.
Yeah, it's a bit ridiculous that they forgot him. You're right. There is an answer for everything, with the exception of the fact that the police don't follow up very diligently. Um, Maybe this isn't due to technology, but with social norms today, that would have been taken far more seriously. I could actually see like child services, or I guess that's what it's called in the United States, being involved with something like abandoning your child or forgetting your child at home. I could certainly see a situation where that would happen.
I
So
think
in
I
that sense, yeah, it wouldn't work.
Yeah, I think I agree with Minty Python. It's less the technology, because if you're gonna Deus Ex Machina, or like explain away a bunch of technology missing, well, the iPad's gone. There's some, if you keep it in the winter, then the Wi-Fi has been knocked out, power's out, whatever you have it. Trying to bypass technology is easy, but trying to bypass the idea that we kind of have ingrained, probably caused by movies like this, that a child would be in like mortal danger if he was alone for a few days, I think is a lot more what would make this movie unmakeable.
Now, Mrs. McCallister, you are indeed a mother in real life, so I guess I'll put this question to you. Do you think the McCallisters are bad parents?
A lot of the parental responsibility, I feel like, is them flying first class while the rest of the family flies business class or economy, whatever. Um, because if you notice in the plane, Mr. and Mrs. McCallister are sitting in first class and they have no idea who's actually on the plane. So, like, whether or not cell phones are around, I still think you could still find ways to make this movie happen. But the fact that they don't sit with their family is kind of just where they don't even realize on the flight. It happens in Home Alone 2 as well. So I don't know, like, I think it's an easy mistake. I ran away a lot as a kid and my mom lost me a lot. Um there's lots of ways you can remake this. So I don't know, like, it is an easy mistake, but at the same time there were some things that Mr. and Mrs. McCallister had done to kind of neglect their kids or understand family. But one point that I will make in their defense is how big the family was, in that there were multiple cousins. They had Uncle Frank and all the cousins with their family join. um you could kind of, with big large family situations, you're not necessarily looking at every child.
I am one of 7 children. I don't know how many children are in that airplane, but there is absolutely zero chance that even if my parents were in first class, that any of me or any of my siblings would not have noticed one of our missing siblings. And we're a typical family. There are plenty of quarrels between siblings. So yeah, that part. Now I'm just realizing how absurd that is right now. And the fact that it happens again in the second one, and I don't know if it happens in the third one, is that would be traumatizing to a mother. I don't think that would ever happen again.
If I remember correctly, I think there were supposed to be 11 kids on the flight, including Kevin, because when the older girl does the head count, she counts 11 and included Kevin in that number because she thought that the neighbor, what the neighbor child that was in the van looking through the stuff in the bag was Kevin, but it wasn't. I do actually want to take a quick moment though to say that I get it. I understand people like watching this movie and being like, I don't believe it. Like they'd leave like a kid at home. How did they forget about that? How this and that happened? But I think someone mentioned earlier that I do think John Hughes actually does a pretty good job at kind of having an answer for everything. When I was rewatching it last night, like there are so many things that happen, like milk spilling on Kevin's ticket. So Kevin's ticket gets thrown out, so it's not there at the airport. You have Kevin going to like the attic to sleep upstairs, so he's away from all the chaos when everyone wakes up in the morning and has to get ready quickly. When they do the head count, they accidentally count the neighbor's kid as Kevin. And something I just realized too when I was watching it is I kind of forgot how much all the other kids really don't like Kevin that much. In the first 5-10 minutes, we really get this sense that it's kind of like Kevin against everyone because he doesn't have any buddies to hang out with. And like anytime he tries to ask questions or get someone to help him, they give him a hard time and kind of leave him be. So I would even also make the argument that on top of all the crazy things that happen that result in Kevin not being included and being woken up and getting on that plane, is that I also think that, you know, because they weren't crazy about him, because he didn't have any buddies that were specifically kind of established in those first few scenes, it's almost like the kids that were getting up and getting ready were thinking about the other kids that they get along with or the other siblings, and that they kind of forgot Kevin. Now, I understand that towards the end of the movie, we see that, like, oh no, his siblings do love him. But I think in that time and place, there are a lot of things that set up quite well why Kevin could be forgotten. And is it totally impossible, totally implausible? Maybe, but I have heard a lot of really strange stories of things that have happened in reality that you hear it and you're like, there's no way that's true, but it is. So I think it's kind of possible, and I think John Hughes did the best with the circumstances he was given.
And to be fair, we are being a little nitpicky about this particular point because ultimately, I don't, I don't think that the suspension of disbelief is something that was supposed to be within the realms of reality for this movie. I think that even the weird coincidence that caused this movie to happen is part of the comedy, and even though it was written reasonably, I think part of it, to me, part of it was always kind of written for laughs. Like, it is laughable how unpopular Kevin is with his siblings. It is kind of laughable how this could actually work. I always thought that was an integral part of the comedy, and it's just really there to enable the end part, which, as I think Average Joseph mentioned, is the more memorable part. And so that's really where the movie is supposed to be. And you could probably make the argument that you didn't even have to put that much effort into covering the details. Not that it seems unnatural the way they do it, and I think that's one of the strengths of the script is not just that they cover a lot of the plot holes, if you will, but it is done in a way that doesn't seem too forced. I mean, the way his siblings react when they see him again at the end does seem that to make the beginning hatred of him or disdain of him a little bit forced, but at the in the moment it didn't feel that forced, and it just felt like organically this was like, oh yeah, this is just a lead up for the funny antics at the end.
Yeah, if you watch I watched the final, like I watched the movie last night, and that final scene where he does see his family again, like almost immediately they all kind of like walk off and leave him alone again. And I was like, you literally, you just, this whole thing was based on like not be, and then you just leave him by himself again. I'm like, clearly his family does not love him all that much.
Yeah, at the beginning of this movie, I was really put off with the way they treated him. I, I, I didn't actually want to finish the movie. I found it very off-putting,
I
and
mean, he didn't help
realized
himself. He
what's
did not help himself in those
no,
situations.
sure, but
I thought
yeah, absolutely. But I understand why they did it. It works with the movie, but as a first-time viewer, it certainly was not. Yeah, it was nothing. I did not like it.
it gets worse in Home Alone 2, I think.
Yeah, and that brings up a good point. Like Home Alone is a hard movie to do a sequel to because, as we've just discussed, the whole kind of concept requires such a large number of coincidences and suspensions of disbelief to like allow this scenario to play out. And Home Alone 2, while I love Tim Curry as the hotel concierge, it is literally in so many ways beat for beat like the same movie, and your suspension of disbelief kind of just gets thrown out the window to be like as if all these same things would happen again. And we won't talk about that movie for now, just to say it does exist. Home Alone 3, to answer your question, Minty Python, is like a spiritual sequel because it's about a different kid who also lives in Chicago, and it's a totally different. It's still over the Christmas season, but he's not he's left at home alone because he's sick. So like his family isn't abandoning him. He's just alone in the house during the day. That's a different conversation for a different day as well. Um, but yeah, so let's talk about the slapstick. Let's talk about the. I think this is the other reason why the movie is so well remembered, is beyond the kind of wish fulfillment that comes with a kid getting to like be unsupervised. There's also this whole finale that, I'm having a hard time thinking of movies that are like this, where it literally is like a live action cartoon, in that the slapstick violence that you see on screen would like kill these people in real life. But I don't know, watching it happen on screen, I laugh every time.
This is the part where, like, as a mom, I really would have a hard time watching this movie with my son, because I actually get uncomfortable with some of the slapstick humor. I know I keep bringing it up with Home Alone 2, but Home Alone 2, like, Kevin McCallister clearly needs counseling with how many bricks he's throwing to their heads. Like, that's like, he becomes becomes a murderer basically in that movie. But I mean, I guess if my parents left me twice, I might have some serious counseling as well. Um, but yeah, like, it just makes it hard for me to watch an 8-year-old kid. I think he's 8 in the movie, right? An 8-year-old kid torture 2 grown men. Um, some of the slapstick is really funny. Like, I would agree that, like, the tarantula or the Christmas ornaments, those things wouldn't kill a person, but a flamethrower to the head, that stuff is like, I don't know, like, there's some evil in Kevin McCallister. And I love this movie, but it makes me uncomfortable to watch this with any kid, and it makes me wonder why I watched it as a kid. But yeah, I think there's something wrong with Kevin McCallister.
So there's something I wanted to point out about the slapstick, because yeah, I've laughed many times watching the finale, and I think if I had to guess, I think one of the things that makes a slapstick comedy work is that I think it's more fun when you have people that are idiots, when you have people that are morons. Because if you have people that are smart and able to avoid the slapstick situations, then you don't have slapstick comedy, right? It dawned on me that. So the wet bandits are really dumb, as we see as they get outsmarted by a child time and time again. And you'd think, like, if they just took their time and slowly kind of inspected the area, certain areas, that they might be able to avoid certain traps. But something dawned on me last night. So the part that makes me cringe every time, of course, is when Marv is going up the steps and steps on the nail, right? I think we can all agree that, like, every time that happens, we're just like, oh, that would be so painful. So he steps on the nail, he falls backwards, and he's in pain. So he gets out of the basement and he goes around through the window, and he opens up the window. And I remember thinking to myself, like, he puts his feet down on the ornaments and like hurts himself again. And I told my wife, I'm like, man, that's got to be a high brand of stupidity to step on a nail, and then the next entrance you take to get into the house, you are not looking where your feet are going. Because if he did, he would have avoided the trap. But he can't be that smart. He has to be more dumb than that, so that we can watch these guys make fools of themselves and get hurt time and time again.
I think it's the progressive head trauma, the fact that they're perpetually getting hit in the head, and that they're like, they're slowly like losing more and more of their rationality the more injured they become.
I think there's another thing that kind of goes into that. Well, a few other things. One of them is, yes, it's cartoonish violence is strange in live action, especially when it is devoid of like long-term consequences other than the immediate reaction, which allows it to appear less violent. But at the same time, there's something to be said for the fact that the bandits are really, really mean. Like, I don't want to say really, really mean, but like, they say some upsetting thing to Kevin. Like, they're threatening him with some really perturbing imagery when they say what they're going to do to him when they catch him, and it kind of, I, I, I I don't know. I always found that part really uncomfortable, and then as a follow up, I wonder if they made them say such outlandish things or make outlandish threats to so that people would not feel as bad about how hurt they got. But the other thing, which I think just goes back with the Kevin McCallister as a sociopath, he is basing his interaction with these people on a movie of which we basically only know that a guy takes out a machine gun, shoots people, and insults them. I mean, if that's the baseline he's going from, yeah, no wonder he's doing these terrible things to people.
This McCulkey guy is clearly disturbed, but I also think that the Marv and Henry, I think his name is
Harry.
Harry, they're also disturbed. I wasn't convinced that they were idiots or morons. They seemed like successful bandits. They see, if I'm understanding correctly, they do this thing regularly and they hit up multiple houses. I sensed a real bloodlust. They seemed really intent on hurting the child, and I think that's backed up by the threats they were making against him. But yeah, Kevin is also mentally disturbed in some way because he waits to torture them and then he calls the police when he could have done that at the beginning. But that being said, the slapstick part was definitely the best part of the movie. If I had to watch it again, I think I'd skip the first, I guess 60% of the movie, I think it is, and then watch the last 40%.
See, I'm
Yeah,
opposite. I love the Christmassy feel of Home Alone, and I cringe during the slapstick part, and I am horrified for this 8-year-old kid to be thinking this way.
Yeah, I think we should probably just acknowledge part of why this movie works is because Macaulay Culkin does an excellent job playing Kevin. He seems so genuine, and and a lot of his reactions are genuine reactions, and he's very charming. Like for I think he was in like a 9-year-old in real life at this point, but he was playing an 8-year-old. He really sells it. You really feel like he is going through everything he's experiencing. And as a kid, I was able to really imagine myself in his scenario up until the point where he's injuring people. That's where I kind of it seemed less realistic for me. But this does raise this question of Kevin as a character because, yeah, he seems a little off. He seems almost like a very manipulative individual. Like he knows when to try and be sad to get his mom's empathy. He seems very set in his ways. And yeah, it is concerning, but it's also strange because at the beginning they say, oh, like he doesn't even know how to pack his own suitcase. So like this is a kid who does not understand the concept of packing a bag for a trip, and yet he's able to set up these elaborate death traps.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I honestly had never thought of that before, and I don't know if maybe that's something like we're supposed to find funny that he can't do that, but he can make all these traps. I mean, I'm obviously open to other interpretations. I did want to highlight quickly though that I think one of quite possibly my favorite scene, and this scene happens well before the actual slapstick routine at the end of the movie, is I really love the scene in the church. I love how Kevin's by himself on Christmas Eve. He goes into the church, and old man Marley goes to sit next to him, who he is pretty much convinced that he was the South Bend shovel slayer. And then we realize that he isn't. He's just kind of an old man. And I love the scene that they have together. I think what's great about a lot of Macaulay Culkin's line deliveries is that the way he talks sometimes kind of sounds like someone who is older than he is, right? The way he uses certain words and the way he kind of certain inflections, it sounds like it could be someone who's like 20 or 25 years old when it's coming from an 8-year-old child. But that scene gets me every time. I love the rendition of "O Holy Night" that's being sung by the choir, and I love the conversation they have, which is ultimately between these two kind of lonely people who one is very young, one is very old, but in a way they kind of help each other out, and I think it's kind of a good setup for the heartwarming finale that we get.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. There's a cuteness to Macaulay Culkin as well. Like I would say that I don't think he turned out to be as cute as people were hoping him to be, but as a kid, like he just did such a great job portraying the cuteness of a child, but then the I guess maturity in some ways of an adult, the way that he really related to his neighbor and just or in Home Alone 2 the bird lady. And it does bring a heartwarming sense. But one thing I will say, that I am no psychologist, by the way, but I I think there's something off with Mr. McCallister, and he seems kind of an absent dad to Kevin McCallister. Um, by the way, like my name is Mrs. McCallister, and that's because my movie crush of all movies is Mr. McCallister, like like Kevin's dad here. and I won't go into that detail, but I will say that, like, even when they find out that Kevin is missing, who is crying out and doing all the work and doing whatever it takes to get back to Kevin? It's the mom. The dad's just kind of there, but he doesn't really do anything. Um, and so I don't know, like, even you'll notice that his dad will always take Buzz's side in different scenes. And I just feel like, anyways, there's something that could be off there with his relationship with his dad.
To me, it just seemed like they were really playing up that idea of the absentee father, the absent father who is probably neglects all his children to a point where I'm sure that, I mean, that obviously does happen in real life, but I don't know if they were trying to like portray him as someone with some kind of mental issues, just an absent father.
That's fair. I mean, I really appreciate how he flew his whole family up to Paris and then the next year to Florida. So he was a good guy in that sense.
Maybe that's how he says "I love you." He buys people expensive trips.
Maybe. Anyways, I'm becoming a psychologist as to why Kevin McCallister is seriously messed up.
I lost the train of what I was going to say earlier, and now I just want to go on a big rant about the portrayal of Mr. McCallister and fathers in movies and the whole men are incompetent at taking care of children, but I won't get into that. Instead, I think that the thing I was going to say, that's what it is, was that for kind of the strange thing, I think everybody kind of agrees that it's almost like Home Alone is two movies, and I think that's like I was thinking about it, that might be why it did appeal to so many people, because there are those who get their nice Christmassy feels that are cute and fuzzy and warm, and then there are people who just like the slapstick, who like the completely crazy movie, and I think that's also weirdly kind of the point I was making earlier when it's like the two are kind of disconnected. Like they are in the same story, but Home Alone could be the first half of the movie, and then in the second half, just have them find him and him managing to be alone, and then reunion. You'd still have a good, warm, fuzzy Christmas movie. And likewise, you could put any beginning premise to that movie at any time of the year where he gets home alone, when the kid is home alone over a couple of days, whether from neglect, forgotten, whatever, no matter the reason, and he has to deal with the bandits, and that could also be a good movie. And I think the two of them actually have no necessary link to one another, but they are both in the movie, and that's why it kind of has a broader audience.
Yeah, you could almost edit this into two short films, like both movies being about a kid left home alone over Christmas, and have one short film that's just all the family stuff, and ending with like the church scene, and then the other movie that's all about like the plot involving the burglars. Like I think that'd be an interesting experiment for someone to try and do. I guess my thought with Mr. McCallister, yes, like he seems much less devoted to getting back to Kevin than the mom, played brilliantly by Canadian Catherine O'Hara. But in the end, like for all her persistence and all her kind of like crazy, like I'm gonna get back to Kevin no matter what, I'm gonna get on a bus or a truck with polka musicians. What did that get her? Like an extra like 2 minutes with Kevin before the rest of them show up. So maybe there's something to Mr. McCallister's like, well, let's just go and like wait and see what happens approach versus her kind of let's just do this no matter what approach.
I agree. To be fair, I'd marry Mr. McCallister.
Interesting.
What's not to like about him, really? He's rich, he's generous, and he's a good-looking guy.
That checks all the boxes. You're right, Mrs. McCallister.
Yeah, he's got a nice big house.
Exactly.
Yeah. I heard that when they were casting the mom, they said they had to find somebody who could like sell the comedy of like the frantic, like, oh my gosh, we lost our kid. But they also had to like find an actress who could like portray the genuine emotion of like the sorrow and like the like regret that came from missing, like losing a child. And so to throw this back to you, Mrs. McCallister, do you feel like Mrs. McCallister in the movie did a good job of balancing those two elements?
Absolutely. I actually, every time I watch a movie, it reminds me a lot of my own mom. So there's definitely like a nostalgia to it, the movie. And anyways, like how my mom has reacted to me, like I said, I got lost a lot as a kid, and I feel like I saw my mom every time that reunion scene happens.
All right. Well, who are we to argue with real children, or real parents? Ben, the movie buff, you're also a parent, so maybe can you comment on how the parents are portrayed?
Yeah, no, it's. I was thinking about that as you guys were talking about it. Um, I think the important thing to remember, and my son is he's going to be 17 months in a week or two. But I think the thing we need to remember is that as parents, we have such an incredible job, but it's also one that can be very difficult and unrelenting, right? So, yes, we love to believe that like parents are there for their kids and love them and are generous and this and that, but sometimes we lose our temper. Sometimes we don't care as much as we should. And I think like how we see the parents being in the first 10 minutes when Kevin is kind of being a stick in the mud and not getting along with the other family members, is that you can tell that they probably just have a million things going on, right? Like they have to host the extended family coming over to their place and feeding them and getting ready the next day when the storm kind of shuts down the power and it means that they're late. Like I feel like there's a lot going on that kind of explains the way they act. It doesn't necessarily justify the way that they act and the way that they treat Kevin, but I think it goes to show that like they have 5 kids, and if I remember correctly, I think Kevin is the youngest. So I think because of that, like they've gone through this whole having a kid and then another kid and then another kid and another one and then having Kevin. That I think it just goes to show that sometimes parents lose their cool. Sometimes parents forget things like a child at home, for example. And but I think the important thing to remember too is that despite the mistakes they make in the first part of the movie, that towards the end, uh, the mother and the father, in their own different ways, as we know, both put effort into getting back home to make sure that Kevin is okay. And I think that's the thing to remember is that um, we make mistakes, but can we apologize for them? Can we redeem ourselves to show that, you know what, we're not going to be miserable and awful to you and never apologize for it. Like we're going to try and get better. We're going to try and redeem ourselves. We're going to try and have some improvement. So that is the thing that kind of stuck out with me, is that despite the way they treat Kevin and some of the decisions maybe they make throughout the movie, they do manage to get back home to see Kevin for Christmas. And I think that is so meaningful that that's why it resonates with families.
So the overall legacy of Home Alone is probably more negative than positive because, like, you think of the people who were involved in just the franchise, it kind of just gradually went downhill for most people. As we said, Home Alone got 2 theatrically released sequels. The third one being more or less a spin-off that was just its own thing and not very good. And then there were like 2 direct like TV movies that had the Home Alone name on them, were also not very good by any definition of the word. And then you look at the people involved. John Hughes, who produced this movie and wrote it, he really did not really have another hit after this. He had made so many successful films in the 80s, like The Breakfast Club and 16 Candles and Ferris Bueller's Day Off, that Home Alone kind of marked a transition for him trying to make more family films. And nothing he did after this was successful, and he passed away in 2009. Macaulay Culkin himself, this movie really launched his career, and he was in a lot of movies for those early parts of the 1990s, but he unfortunately got involved in some shady stuff and drug problems, and I think he's on the other end of it now, but he certainly has not really returned to acting since really the late 90s. John Candy, who has a memorable cameo in this film, passed away in the mid 90s as well. So really the only person Catherine O'Hara still has a great career. John Hurd, the actor who played Mr. McCallister, died in like 2008 or something.
With an overdose, I think.
Yeah, so it's like, ironically, Joe Pesci is still kicking. But it is like, I guess Chris Columbus, the director, he arguably got away with this movie with the best legacy because he got to make Mrs. Doubtfire and the first 2 Harry Potter movies. But even then, I can't think of anything he's actually like made since 2002. So, you can argue all day, I guess, if this film actually has a positive legacy or not. Perhaps if we just imagine Home Alone as its own thing, we can say it has a positive legacy because it has become a Christmas tradition for most. And just transitioning out of final thoughts, if you had to summarize your feelings about Home Alone in like just one tweet, because imagine we all still use Twitter. I don't really, but some people probably do. How would you guys describe your final thoughts on this movie?
Fun movie to watch as a family, but nothing to write home about, and certainly nothing to watch over and over again every Christmas.
Merry Christmas, you filthy animal!
I would say that Home Alone is a fun Christmas movie, does a really great job with setting up how you could potentially leave your child at home, has lots of heartwarming moments, lots of fun slapstick comedy towards the end, and is overall quite enjoyable and worth a watch with the family.
I would say heartwarming and has all the Christmassy feels that it just makes it a great annual tradition.
I would say Home Alone is a serviceable B-type Christmas film, and despite its many flaws, it is very enjoyable. And with that being said, on the Bachelor podcast, of course, we give Bat Cookie ratings to movies after we've talked about them. So again, Mrs. McCallister, you're new here, so we, of course, we're the Bat Jar podcast. So we're a Bat Cookie Jar podcast. So things that go inside the Bat Jar are Bat Cookies. And we rate things here out of 4 Bat Cookies, and we do allow for decimals. So, for example, I would give Home Alone, the first Home Alone anyway, probably like 3.2 out of 4 Bat Cookies.
I would say 3.8 Bachelor cookies.
As much as I like to say it's nothing to write home about, but I would give it a 3 out of 4. I think that's a good safe rating.
I'm with Average Joseph. I'll give it 3.2 out of 4 Bat Cookies.
Well, I'm just going to be the wet blanket here and give it a 2.8 out of 4. I do enjoy it, and I enjoy parts of it, but again, the parts that I enjoy are the latter half, and they don't need to be in that movie. And so I was never big into Christmas movies. 2.8.
So there we go. If you, in the off chance you're like Minty Python and haven't seen Home Alone before, now's your chance to go check it out. It's available on Disney Plus because that's the other kind of casualty of the Home Alone series is that Fox doesn't exist anymore in the same way. It now is owned by Disney. So yeah, it's on Disney Plus. And I did get in an argument with the housemate last night. I have the DVD for Home Alone, so we were trying to watch on the DVD, but the even though it was released on DVD in 2008, the version that's on Disney Plus is so much higher quality that it's not even funny. So like, if you don't have Disney Plus, I'm sure you can rent it other places, but don't buy the 2008 DVD because it does not look very good. This is normally when we would go into the Bat Jar and look at our mail, but we don't have any this week. And we'll now remind you how you can get a hold of us.
If you want to reach the show, you can send us an email at
batjarpodcast@gmail.com.
Or you can tweet us at
The Bat Cookie Jar.
You can find the Bat Jar podcast wherever you listen to podcasts, including YouTube, because we got a channel. Share our posts on Facebook, write reviews, give our shows a rating. This will help all people join us inside the Bat Jar, and we appreciate it dearly.
It makes us so sad to be mailless. Imagine if Santa was mailless. Average Joseph is very much like Santa. He's jolly. He loves Christmas. Send him your mail.
Okay, I don't know if you guys are doing this intentionally, but my name is Average Joe, and I keep getting referred to as Average Joseph, and we'll ruin the trademark there is no trademark, but imagine my trademark is Average Joe. So, I have not called all of you out every time, but let's just keep that in mind.
I was definitely doing it on purpose, but I have a justification. It's Christmassy. Saint Joseph, Average Joseph.
Well, if you're anything like Santa Claus, Average Joe, you should be able to forgive us.
Oh, fair enough. Now, normally this is when we would go inside the Bat Jar and pull out our topic for next week, but we're going to circumvent the Bat Jar because it is still the Christmas season, and we're going to do something just, I don't know how this is going to happen or how it's going to go, but we're going to talk about Hallmark Christmas movies next week.
Why?
Awesome. Awesome.
So fun.
Are we going to have to watch all the Hallmark Christmas movies before next week to get ready?
There are far too many. If this was like our full-time job, then maybe, but I think it'll be interesting for us to really like discuss this phenomenon of the Hallmark Christmas movie. So, we want to thank Mrs. McCallister, Minty Python, and Ben the Movie Buff for being with us this week.
Always a pleasure.
Yeah, always a pleasure. Thanks so much, Average Joe and Beef Pork Ribs.
This is a lot of fun.
But until next time, when we talk about Hallmark Christmas movies, I'm Average Joe.
I'm Beef Pork Ribs.
I'm Ben the Movie Buff.
I'm Minty Python.
And I'm Mrs. McCallister.
Catch you on the flip side.
One last time, ya filthy animal.
Ho, 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 ho.
Goodbye.
Bye.